This strain of libertarianism, I think, is a very dangerous thought.
We are dangerous to the status quo of this country.
Watch out, politicians. Libertarians are coming. And we're skeptical of both parties.
The good old boys in the party on both sides of the aisle.
I want to live in the freest possible world I can.
Why does that offend people?
If we put in total libertarian actions, there would be almost anarchy, mob rule.
Come to Somalia, libertarian paradise.
This is why people think libertarians are.
You're living in a world of theory.
But more Americans now say,
I'm a libertarian.
And that's good because
you work longer to pay for government than you do for food, clothing, and housing combined.
Will there be a successful libertarian political party? I'm not sure, because some say organizing libertarians is like
herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
But more young people are saying,
I own my body, I own my labor, and I own my property.
When people try to control other people, really bad things happen.
The rise of the libertarian. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
What the heck is libertarianism? I didn't know when I started reporting. I was just one more liberal. I knew there were Republicans, and Democrats. That was closer to us, college students. And then there were crazy people, but I had no idea there was an actual movement of thinking people who want to honor the principle of the founders, liberty and limited government. Who knew? Took me a long time to wake up, and I'll talk about that later in the show. But the good news is that more people have woken up. A recent Gallup poll found most Americans think the government's doing too much. Good. After I woke up to the stupidity and destructiveness of big government, I stumbled across this libertarian magazine, Reason. Its motto, free minds and free markets. And this is what has taught me the most about the benefits of liberty. Its most recent editors are Nick Gillespie and Matt Welch. So, is this America's libertarian moment?
Well, you know, John, I think actually we should start talking about the libertarian era because it is upon us. What has opened people's ideas or minds up to libertarian ideas is the 21st century so far has been a demonstration project of how Republicans and conservatives can screw things up under the Bush years, and now we have the Obama version and the liberal Democrat version of screwing everything up. So people understand that trying to control more and more parts of people's lives doesn't work. They're looking for an alternative, and that's what libertarianism offers, the idea of free minds and free markets, that you can control more parts of your life.
But libertarian era, I want to believe you, but I just don't see that many people getting it.
Well, that's a shorthand for libertarianism can be you're fiscally conservative and you're socially tolerant, right? Poll after poll will show you that Americans are much more fiscally conservative than their elected representatives. A majority of Americans thinks that we should balance the budget. Big majorities and growing majorities, especially of young people, are more socially tolerant. They think that we should legalize marijuana, which no politician wants to talk about. They're in favor of gay marriage.
Well, more are now coming around.
They will come around last. You know, the people lead the way in this case. And so when you have the populace who is actually much more libertarian than the government, you will begin to see some of these expressions in the political marketplace and elsewhere.
Still, all kinds of skepticism. Libertarians are just considered odd and weird by including my colleagues.
That's a nice story, right, Stossel, even for a libertarian like you? Here's how desperately wrong you are. That's what's happening, man. And you don't care. Stossel doesn't care.
What's the hostility?
Part of it is that we have a major two-party system in this country, and people tend to, especially in political media and elsewhere, congregate around the Republican tribe and the Democratic tribe. What they are failing to recognize, and they see everything through that. So if you are against their team that's in power using libertarian arguments, you are by definition a freak, right? You're on the other side. But what they don't understand is that the world is changing around them, and people are more used to picking off issues one by one instead of accepting everything that a that big party cramped.
But let me just defend Bill O'Reilly for a moment, because uncharacteristically, because I don't think he has a tribe. He genuinely believes that to legalize drugs or sex work or gambling is harmful.
But you know,
many Americans do.
One of the things that is interesting is when he said you're living in theories or you're dreaming up ideas. We invaded Iraq based on a theory that turned out to be wrong, and then the idea behind that theory was we can go in there and create democracy, just whip it up like a souffle. It didn't work. We're now suffering under Obamacare and other types of financial regulations that are based on theory that have nothing to do in fact. And then when you go to the libertarian side of things, when you talk about places like Google or Apple or Whole Foods markets, where these are not theories, these are not abstract concepts, these are the incarnation of the idea that people with freedom to think and to do stuff produce really interesting results. And that's the reality.
And pursuant to the idea about the drug war or people doing things for themselves and hurting themselves, the reality on the ground by almost everybody who's looked at it very closely is that the drug war, as stated, what it was trying to do has failed.
I think Americans confuse libertarian and libertine.
Sometimes, and that can be a problem because, the fact is if you believe in social tolerance, you're going to have to put up with a lot of lifestyles that you yourself might not choose. You get more peace by allowing people to go about their business as long as they're not forcing it on other people. And if that means sometimes you have to look away, well, do it. That's not so bad.
There's a stereotype that paints libertarians as obsessed with marijuana and drug legalization. That led Ann Coulter to say this.
You want to suck up to your little liberal friends and say, oh, but we want to legalize pot. This is why people think libertarians are...
We bleeped a word that means wimps, basically.
Yeah, well, I do want to say she is right. We are bleeps.
But in her war, which is the war against liberals and Democrats, we're not useful for her at all moments, and so therefore we seem to be weak-kneed and not part of it. What she doesn't understand is that we are freely choosing to do this not because we're trying to suck up to anybody, but because we think it's a genuinely bad idea when the government gets in between you and your decisions, which is a conservative notion fundamentally. The limited government notion that Ann Coulter otherwise supports in most cases is one that says the government can't solve your problems for you. It's not going to change your morality for the better. She knows that, but because she's a tribalist and because she's fundamentally intolerant, she can't brook someone else having a different approach. I welcome Ann Coulter's libertarianism when it's applied. I'm not part of her tribe, and I'm not ever going to be.
Well, she does brook it. She came on the show and talked.
But it's also, it is true that I think libertarians care a lot about drug legalization because that's a very clear case of the government saying you cannot do this, you can't change your mind by ingesting this rather than that. Booze is okay, pot is not okay. That's a clear libertarian issue. But the fact of the matter is libertarians have been the people who have been sounding the alarm about government spending, the size, scope, and spending of government, and the uselessness of most government interventions into everyday life. It's not just about pot.
Some say there can never be a successful libertarian party because libertarians are too independent. People claim organizing libertarians into a political party is like
herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
That was a great Super Bowl commercial for an internet firm. They have a point, and the Libertarian Party has never done much of anything.
Well, that's true, and the fact is that America, in its history, sometimes it has more than two parties, but basically there's always going to be two major parties because that's the way the electoral system shakes out. What can change and what is changing is that libertarian ideas, whether it's in the Libertarian Party or the Republican Party or even the Democratic Party, influence a lot of things, and I think we're starting to see that now. The Tea Party, to the extent that it's been successful, it's been hammering on the very libertarian theme that the government is spending too much. And that has really changed American politics, and it will continue to because the simple math shows us that the government cannot go on spending the way that it's spending. Libertarianism has a kind of innate appeal because it trusts people to get on with their lives. You're going to make mistakes, and you'll have people help you out.
I disagree. I think government has an innate appeal. There's a problem. We need a law to solve it.
No, I mean, there's definitely that reaction. But what it is that, libertarianism says, hey, give it a try out your life and, and see where you end up.
Many people seem to believe libertarians want chaos. Here's a clip from Fox Business Network. The speaker's a leader of a Tea Party group.
You need to understand, there is a consequence to saying you're a libertarian, and if we put in total libertarian actions, there would be almost anarchy, mob rule.
It's a widespread belief.
There is anarchism within libertarianism. I mean, Nick and I have had conversations with people who are always beating us up because we're not anarchistic enough. There's, developed theories about that if you remove government out of a lot of life, human flourishing will proceed. It's an interesting philosophical theory. I don't think necessarily that is the majority of libertarians. What we're trying to do is influence and kind of take the ship that has been lumbering along in this direction. First of all, say stop, and then can we just sort of move it this way and get it so that it's not taking so much of our life and so much of our money?
At least a lot of the Tea Party people and some Republicans seem to be coming around. I was happy to hear this famous politician say this.
I'm listening to those independents, to those libertarians who are saying, it is both sides of the aisle, the leadership, the good old boys in the party.
5 years ago, nobody would have been talking about libertarians.
No, and I think it's great, and I think it's a sign, that the libertarian moment, that the libertarian era is upon us. And I think, we welcome people who talk about being libertarians because that means they're starting to engage a new set of ideas.
And there's something intellectually attractive about being somewhat consistent, right? Democrats and Republicans will completely switch views depending on whether they are in power. Suddenly, the Democrats love the NSA. Suddenly, Republicans hate government spending. And that's going to flip when they go back into power. Libertarians have a pretty consistent argument. They didn't love George W. Bush, and they don't love Barack Obama.
A lot of libertarians say, oh, we don't want Sarah Palin. She doesn't get it. There's a lot of dissent in libertarianism. I mean, some longtime libertarians are skeptical. People like Glenn Beck, and a libertarian who will appear later on this show, said people like Beck, we must reject their efforts and make it clear we're not on the same team. Here's Beck's response to that.
I don't understand when somebody says, hey, you know what? I'm moving your direction. Why would you, instead of embracing them, why instead do people stand there and say, we don't want you? Well, that's going to give you 1%.
There are a lot of very fussy libertarians.
For sure. When you edit Reason Magazine, you get to know them very intimately. Whoever's going to join me issue by issue, I am happy for that issue. I don't feel like I need to create a litmus test that they need to pass. I don't need to not go to that rally because there might be non-libertarians at it, which is what a lot of people on the left were doing at the recent Anti-Patriot Act rally in Washington, D.C. They were injecting a purity test against libertarians. I think Americans understand that you go bit by bit in your life. You're a la carte everywhere, and you should be a la carte on politics and policy. So if Glenn Beck wants to go full libertarian, I salute you, brother.
Thank you, Nick and Matt, and thank you for Reason Magazine. If you'd like to keep this conversation going, please go on Facebook or Twitter, and you can use the hashtag over here, The Rise, to let people know what you think.